are one, the need that becomes dominant and pushes everything else away. And this, in our theory and in our evidence, is the quest for significance, the quest to matter, the quest to have respect, to have dignity. This is what Professor Klaus Schwab talked about in today's opening lecture. Now, there are two things that need to be said about this quest for significance. People talked about a variety of different motivations for terrorism. Honor, respect, the perks of heaven, feminism, adoration of the leader. Yes, they're all true, but underlying them is this one quest for significance. There are special cases. The second thing that needs to be said about this quest for significance is that it can be channeled in different ways. We all want significance. We all want to matter. We all crave respect, but none of us would pursue it through violent extremism. So it takes a narrative, ideological narrative. Mr. El-Bulehi talked about the importance of ideology. You need a narrative that suggests that the only way to attain significance is through violence. And Professor Scott Atran, who is going to be speaking after me, developed a very important understanding of ideology that justifies violence in the name of significance based on the group's sacred value. So this is the second N, the narrative. And the third N is the network. We are social beings. We need our shared reality to be validated by others. Our friends, people who respect, charismatic leaders. So these three ends, when they come together, they form a combustive, explosive mixture that produces radicalization. The need, the narrative, and the network. Here is one example of a total commitment. This is a person who we interviewed recently in Jaffna in Sri Lanka. This person was a member of the Black Tamil Tigers, a suicide unit of the Tamil Tigers, and that's what he told us, how he explained his experience in the suicide unit. What he said is the following: family and relationships are forgotten. There is no place for love. This means a passion and loyalty to the group, to those in charge, to those who sacrifice their lives for the group. Then I came to a stage where I had no love for myself, no value for my life. I was ready to give myself fully, even to destroy myself in order to destroy another person. Total commitment, everything else is forgotten. You know, recently we interviewed in Sri Lanka again a Sri Lankan officer who was responsible for interrogating members of the Black Tamil Tigers, that suicidal unit. And he told us something very surprising about how they select individuals to the unit. They invite a person for an interview, and they let him or her wait in the foyer, in the anteroom, and then they call him into the office, and they ask him, please recall what you have seen in the foyer, the object, the furniture, the art in the room, the utensils, whatever. I thought that they would select a person who was very vigilant, who noticed a lot of things. What shocked me is that they choose the person who remembered nothing. The less they remembered, the more, according to their ideology, was that they so concentrated on the idea of becoming a member of the Black Tigers that nothing else mattered, and they were totally concerned about the task, about that particular endeavor. How is the quest for significance activated? In many cases, it's activated by a loss of significance, humiliation, disenfranchisement, discrimination. And this can be personal, having nothing to do with any kind of conflict, or it can be social. For example, some women terrorists volunteer to a suicide bomber squad because they suffered personal stigma. They were either divorced or infertile, or were alleged to have extramarital affairs. And this personal stigma that had nothing to do with intergroup conflict cause them to sacrifice themselves in order to regain the significance. Very often, it's not your personal loss of significance, but a loss of significance due to your social identity. For example, if all Muslims, if all Tamils, if all Americans suffer, you, as an American, as a Tamil, as a Muslim, is humiliated and loses significance. And Al-Qaeda and others propagandists use that to great effect to arouse that quest for significance in possible recruits. Here is a passage from Abu Yahya Libi that illustrates that. Jihad in Algeria today is your hope with permission from Allah in redemption from the hell of the unjust ruling regimes. It's your youth and your children and your women and so on and so forth, so that the suffering of Muslims everywhere, it's humiliation of you personally, and you have to enlist and fight and be recruited. Very effective, has been used by Al-Qaeda, has been used by ISIS, by Daesh, and it works. As scientists, it's not enough for us to have theory, and we've collected evidence in a variety of ways. We carried out interviews. We carried out surveys. We carried out experiments. We analyzed contents of Al-Qaeda tapes. We used event analysis from public open source materials in order to piece together that puzzle that explains terrorism. We also focused on a variety of different samples. We studied Muslims in the Philippines and in Indonesia. We studied the Tamils in Sri Lanka. We studied neo-Nazis in Germany. We studied white supremacists in the United States. And the underlying process, despite these huge cultural differences, seems to be the same and seems to be explained by 3N network. So just briefly, because my time is somehow coming to an end, this is a correlation between loss of significance and extremism in Sri Lanka, in Philippines, in Spain. Very different populations, very different cases, yet the relation between loss of significance and extremism that we measured in different ways is the same. We even can replicate it in a small-scale experiment in the laboratory. We humiliate experimentally our subjects. We tell them to recall an instance where they were humiliated, and then we see to what extent they endorse their political view, be it Republican or Democrat, to greater extent, to more extreme extent. And you see every single time when we recall their instances of humiliation, they become more extreme in accordance with their ideological beliefs. An important empirical evidence comes from the fate of immigrants and refugees. Immigrants and refugees suffer major loss of significance on part of the countries where they seek refuge. They are discriminated very often. They feel Islamophobia. They feel disenfranchised. They feel very bad. This is a sample of Muslims in the United States, and you see that their feeling of marginalization and humiliation leads to loss of significance, and that leads to support for radical views. And this is published research in just the last year. This is research from white supremacists who committed violent acts or non-violent acts. And we look at the extent to which, based on the evidence we have, they were humiliated, loss of significance, or to greater or lesser extent. And as you look at these correlations, in every case, their loss of significance, whether in their relationships, whether in their professional realm, is correlated with their tendency to carry out violent acts. This is a grim evidence from suicide bombers who succeeded, so they are no longer with us. We looked at archival data, and we look at indices of loss of significance and quest for significance, and the dependent variable, the phenomenon in which we're interested, is the number of people they killed and the number of people they wounded. And again, you see very strong correlations between the loss of significance and their effectiveness, the effort they expended. Finally, from Indonesia, we have strong evidence to support that the relation between loss of significance and extremism depends on the group. The upper group is Indonesians that identify themselves as jihadists, the lower Islamists, and the third one moderates. And you see that the relation between loss of significance and extremism is greatest for the group that supports ideologically the extremists to greatest extent. What can government do? It's important to combat extremism not only in the field of battle, but also to prevent it and to reverse the trend to the extent that it occurs. We know that the human mind is malleable, it's flexible. Mr. El-Bulehi indicated that. So it can be done. The question is, what can we learn from attempts that have done it? We have to try to reduce feelings of insignificance through education, policy. Our governments have to understand the individual quest for dignity. We have to discredit violence. Violence is not the way to significance. One way is to defeat the extremists on the field of battle, but that's not the only way. We have to identify alternative routes to significance. Violence is very difficult to combat because it's so appealing, so primordial. We have to recruit sacred values and idealism in order to combat significance, not just business as usual. And we have to create anti-violence networks. To fight a network, you need a network. As Kurt Vonnegut once said, there is no reason why justice may not prevail if angels were only as well organized as the mafia. I thank you very much.